very important city for a variety of political reasons. It is where it is required by law that the initial Diet, the first, roughly speaking, you would call this the German Parliament, has to meet, and significantly, it's the site of some of the oldest paper mills in Germany, which means it also becomes the site of it also becomes, to some extent, the center of the German printing industry. For those of you familiar with the history of mathematics, Regiomontanus, one of the 15th century mathematicians, sets up one of the first scientific presses there and publishes a number of works of both himself and of other authors. And his press is set up in Nuremberg. And this particular illustration is from something called the Weltchronik of Michael Wohlgemuth. Wohlgemuth is a very prominent printing, I suppose you could call he's the owner of a major printing shop in Nuremberg. And the significance about Wohlgemuth is, and this brings us to Albrecht Dürer. So this is the world that Dürer is born into around 1471, and a brief bit of background. One of the things that happens is he's apprenticed to Wohlgemuth. Wohlgemuth's actually his godfather, and in order to make printings. In order to make printings like this, well, movable type was invented. That's good for printing letters and so on. But if you want illustrations, that's going to require you to take a block and carve out what we would consider to be the negative of the illustration is. You have to have somebody who can carve these illustrations so that they can then be used in the print process. And so this is one of the important things that Dürer learns during his apprenticeship to Wohlgemuth, and he subsequently makes a couple of trips to Italy, 1494 to 1495, right after he got married, actually. I'm not sure what his wife had to say about that, but and then a few years later he returned to Italy, and in the course of these trips he meets Luca Pacioli, he studies Alberti's work intensively, as well as the work of Euclid and Vitruvius, and he comes back immersed in this idea that art is applied geometry, that geometry is essential for somebody who wants to become an artist. And evidently, if you read the introduction to this, well, I'll let the introduction speak for itself. So when he writes the Painter's Manual, the introduction has this wonderful phrase: "Nothing is more annoying to men of understanding, than a blunder in a painting." And what Dürer is talking about is, if you see a painting and there's something that's not right there, that you know is not right about the painting, that is going to significantly detract from your appreciation of the painting. And so Dürer writes up this Painter's Manual, and you can summarize it as it is a compilation of what we think about as practical geometric construction for artists, but there's a lot of interesting theoretical geometry there. There's a lot of things that Dürer does in the Painter's Manual that it's not entirely clear that an artist would find particularly useful. It seems that Dürer is including it just because he feels he finds it interesting and he wants to talk about it. So let's talk about a couple of the problems that would be facing an artist. One of the basic problems in any sort of drawing is, well, how do you draw an object of any? How do you draw any sort of object? So here's a fairly modern picture. This is, I believe, that's Pope Benedict in Munich. Pope Benedict in Munich. And so picture yourself in the 15th century. You see a scene not too dissimilar from this, and you want to recreate this. You want to paint a picture that will show other people what the scene looks like. Or you're carving a wood block that's going to be put into a book. So you want to reproduce this scene. How do you reproduce a complex scene like this? And the standard technique of most artists is everything you see up there is a composition of a variety of basic shapes. So you want to be able to draw those basic shapes, and some of them are fairly straightforward. Straight lines and circles. There are straight lines and circles all over the place in there. They're easily identifiable, and they're easy to draw. Compass and straight edge is going to be your basic tool for drawing straight lines and circles. But there's a bunch of other curves. If you take a close look, for example, at the archways are not quite circles. They have this point at the top, and so that's kind of a